Sometimes, the worst betrayals don't come from enemies, but from the places you call your own. Imagine a woman who spent years protecting her country as an FBI agent. She put her life on the line for justice. Then, one evening, she walked into a restaurant she built with her own hands, only to be treated like an intruder. She was forced out in front of strangers who didn't know who she really was. But hours later, the silence broke, her legal team showed up, and the fight for respect began. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The night had been long for Special Agent Naomi Carter. She was used to long hours, but this day had tested her in ways she hadn't expected. A drug trafficking case had dragged her through back alleys of Baltimore, long interrogations, and endless paperwork. By the time she slipped into her car, her eyes burned, but her heart still carried fire. She wasn't just an FBI agent. She was a black woman who had clawed her way through barriers, surviving both the dangers of the streets and the cold silence of office politics. Her restaurant was her safe place. 5 years earlier, she had opened Carter's Table, a small but stylish restaurant in downtown D.C. The walls were painted in warm amber, with photographs of her late parents framed neatly. It was more than a business. It was memory. It was family. It was her dream. That evening, after the long day, she decided to stop by. She wanted to breathe in the smell of seasoned steak, hear the soft jazz that usually drifted from the speakers, and maybe grab a quiet dinner before heading home. She parked outside, noticing how busy the street was. People walked in and out of her place, dressed in neat jackets and dresses. A Friday night rush. Perfect. Naomi stepped out, still wearing her simple FBI blazer and slacks. She hadn't bothered to change. She walked toward the door, her shoulders relaxing slightly at the thought of familiar faces. But as she reached the entrance, something strange happened. A tall man in a black suit stepped in front of her. He wasn't one of her regular staff. She knew every face in her restaurant. His tone was cold. "Ma'am, you can't go in here tonight." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me, this is a private event." The owner requested no interruptions. The words hit her like a slap. Owner? She was the owner. Naomi studied the man's face, trying to make sense of it. "I'm the owner, Naomi Carter. This is my restaurant." But before he could reply, another voice cut through the air. A woman, blonde, with sharp red lipstick, came striding from inside. She looked Naomi up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "This isn't your place anymore. Not tonight. So please leave." The crowd around the entrance shifted awkwardly. Some customers looked on curiously, while others turned away, not wanting to get involved. Naomi's chest tightened, but she kept her voice firm. "I don't know who you think you are, but I built this restaurant from the ground up. My name is on the deed, and I'm going inside." The blonde woman smirked. "Not tonight, you're not." The security guard stepped forward, his hand brushing her arm as if to escort her away. Naomi's instincts as an FBI agent surged through her. She stepped back sharply, eyes narrowing. "Don't touch me." A hush fell over the bystanders. Naomi could feel the burn of humiliation creeping up her neck. She wasn't just being denied entry. She was being erased in front of strangers, in front of the very people she had hoped would feel welcome in her space. "Call Marcus," Naomi demanded, naming her head chef, who had been with her since day one. "He'll tell you exactly who I am." But the blonde woman's smirk widened. "Marcus doesn't work here anymore. Things have changed." Naomi's pulse raced. She could almost hear the ticking of a clock in her head. This wasn't just a mix-up. Someone was trying to take her place, her name, her hard work. And worse, they were doing it with confidence, as if they knew she had no one to back her up in this moment. The guard took another step. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to leave." Naomi felt the sting of every eye on her. The whispers began. "Isn't she FBI? What's going on? Why are they throwing her out?" Her voice broke through the murmurs, cold and sharp. "You'll regret this." With that, Naomi turned on her heel and walked away. But her hands trembled. The humiliation was sharp, almost unbearable, but beneath it was anger, deep, unshakable anger. She pulled out her phone as she reached her car, fingers steady now. She knew exactly who to call. Within the hour, her attorney's line was ringing. "Naomi, what happened?" The calm voice of Alicia Grant, her lead legal counsel, came through. Naomi's tone was low, tight. "They threw me out of my own restaurant. Told me I wasn't the owner. I want everything. I want answers, and I want them fast." There was silence on the other end. Then Alicia's voice hardened. "Stay where you are. We're coming." Naomi closed her eyes, leaning back in her seat. She could still see the smirk of that blonde woman burned into her mind. Whoever she was, she had made a mistake. Because Naomi Carter wasn't just any woman. She was FBI, and she wasn't alone. Outside, the city lights blurred as Naomi clenched the steering wheel. Somewhere inside her restaurant, strangers were laughing, eating, pretending it was theirs. But she knew one thing. Before the night was over, her presence would be felt again. Not as a customer, not even as the owner, but as a storm. And storms never ask for permission. Naomi sat in her car across the street from her own restaurant, headlights off, hands gripping the steering wheel. The laughter and clinking of glasses inside pierced her chest like knives. People were dining in her place, celebrating as if it had always belonged to them. Every second that passed only added fuel to the fire burning inside her. Her phone buzzed. It was Alicia again. "We're pulling together a team. Don't go back inside until we arrive," Alicia said firmly. Naomi clenched her jaw. "You think I'm going to sit here and watch strangers take over my restaurant?" "Yes," Alicia snapped, her lawyer's tone cutting through the night. "Because if you go in there alone, they'll twist the story, and suddenly it's not about your rights, it's about your behavior. Let us handle this." Naomi leaned back in her seat, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had been trained to face down criminals, to walk into dangerous rooms with her weapon drawn. Yet this felt worse. Being denied her own ground, her own name, was a wound deeper than any case she had worked. Minutes ticked by. Then headlights swept across the street as 3 black SUVs pulled up. Doors opened, and Alicia stepped out, dressed in her signature navy blue power suit. She wasn't alone. 4 other members of Naomi's legal team followed, carrying briefcases, their expressions sharp and serious. Naomi got out of her car, the night air cold against her skin. Alicia walked straight toward her. "You look tired," Alicia said, her voice softer now. "I don't care about tired. I care about getting inside my restaurant." Alicia gave a small nod, then glanced at her team. "Let's go remind them who owns this place." The group moved together toward Carter's table. The guard at the door straightened, eyes narrowing as he saw Naomi returning, this time with backup. "You again?" he said, stepping in front of them. Alicia's voice sliced through the air before Naomi could answer. "Step aside. You're denying entry to the legal owner of this establishment. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." The guard shifted uncomfortably, but then the blonde woman reappeared, heels clicking against the tile as she strode to the entrance. Her smirk hadn't faded. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "looks like you've brought friends." Naomi glared at her. "Who are you?" The woman raised her chin. "You'll find out soon enough." Alicia stepped forward, her eyes cold and calculating. "My client doesn't have time for games. Either let us in, or we'll handle this through the courts. But I can assure you, by tomorrow morning, every news outlet in Washington will know you barred an FBI agent and business owner from her own property." That hit. A flicker of doubt crossed the blonde woman's face. She glanced at the guard, then back at Alicia. "Fine, you can come in, but don't cause a scene." The irony nearly made Naomi laugh. Don't cause a scene? They had thrown her out of her own place, in public, and now they dared warn her about scenes? She kept her silence, though, her anger simmering beneath the surface. The doors swung open, and Naomi stepped inside with her team. The familiar smell of roasted chicken, garlic butter, and red wine sauce hit her immediately. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt poisoned. Her eyes swept the room. The tables were full. Guests sat comfortably, eating food she had once tasted 100 times in the kitchen. But the faces behind the bar, the waitstaff moving between tables, they were strangers. Not one of her original team was there. Her heart sank, but she didn't show it. She kept her expression steady, FBI training kicking in. "You never let an enemy see your weakness." "Where's Marcus?" she asked, her voice sharp. The blonde woman gave a fake sigh. "I told you he's gone. People move on, Agent Carter. You should too." Naomi's fists curled at her sides. Marcus wouldn't just move on. Not after 5 years of loyalty. Something wasn't right. Alicia leaned toward Naomi, whispering low. "Don't let her bait you. We're here to observe, to gather evidence." Naomi nodded slightly, forcing herself to stay calm. She scanned the room again. A group of men in expensive suits sat at the far corner, their voices loud, their laughter sharper than the clinking glasses. They looked out of place, not her usual type of customer. Naomi's instincts flared. This wasn't just about the restaurant. Something bigger was happening here. She turned to Alicia. "Do you see them?" Alicia followed her gaze. Her eyes narrowed. "Yeah, they don't look like casual diners." Before they could speak further, one of the suited men raised his glass toward Naomi. His grin was wide, mocking. "Welcome back, Agent Carter. Didn't think we'd see you here tonight." Naomi froze. He knew her name. The blonde woman quickly stepped in, her voice tight. "Ignore them. They've had too much to drink." But Naomi's eyes stayed locked on the man. She recognized him now. Vincent Russo, a known associate of the Marino crime family. She had seen his file just last month at the bureau. He wasn't just some random diner. He was a dangerous player in organized crime. And he was sitting in a restaurant. Naomi's stomach twisted. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone wanted her out of the way, so people like Russo could sit comfortably at her tables. Alicia touched her arm lightly. "Naomi, don't react here. We'll handle this carefully." Naomi's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "Carefully isn't good enough. This is my place, and they're using it." The weight of the moment pressed heavy on her chest. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, customers, strangers, criminals. The whispers had begun again. The FBI agent, the owner, the woman thrown out, now back with lawyers. She took a slow breath, forcing her shoulders to relax. This wasn't the time to explode. Not yet. But one thing was clear. This fight wasn't just about a restaurant anymore. It was about power. It was about control. And Naomi Carter had just walked into the middle of a storm bigger than she imagined. She glanced once more at Russo, who raised his glass again with a smirk. Naomi didn't look away. If they wanted a war, they had just chosen the wrong woman. The air inside Carter's table was heavy. Naomi felt it pressing against her chest as she stood just a few steps inside her own restaurant. She could smell the food, hear the jazz humming in the background, but everything about it felt foreign, tainted. Vincent Russo still sat in the corner booth with his men, his grin wide and mocking. The blonde woman hovered near the bar, her arms crossed tightly, as if she were guarding something. And all around, the customers tried to act normal, but their eyes flicked toward Naomi and her team, hungry for drama. Alicia leaned closer, her voice low but firm. Naomi, don't let him bait you. Russo wants you to react. They give him power. Naomi's jaw tightened. She had stared down dangerous men before. She had arrested gang leaders, drug dealers, and violent criminals. But this was different. Russo wasn't just taunting her. He was sitting in a restaurant. And whoever the blonde woman was, she had helped make that happen. Naomi didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked toward the bar. The bartender, a young man with nervous eyes, froze as she approached. Where's Daniel? Naomi asked. Daniel had been her bar manager since day one, a tall, easygoing man who knew every cocktail recipe by heart. The bartender hesitated. His eyes darted to the blonde woman before he answered. He doesn't work here anymore. Naomi's chest tightened. Since when? 2 weeks ago. Her stomach sank. 2 weeks ago, she had been buried deep in the Baltimore case, barely able to sleep, let alone check in on the restaurant. It was the perfect time for someone to move in behind her back. She turned to Alicia. This isn't random. They've been planning this. Before Alicia could reply, Russo raised his voice, loud enough for the entire room to hear. You know, Agent Carter, you've got nerve walking back in here. Brave, even. But sometimes bravery gets people hurt. The room went silent. Forks stopped clinking. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Naomi turned slowly toward him, every muscle in her body tense. Is that a threat, Russo? She asked, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. He chuckled, spreading his hands as if innocent. Just advice. This city has a way of chewing people up when they step out of line. The blonde woman moved quickly toward him, whispering in his ear. He waved her off with a laugh. The disrespect in that gesture burned Naomi's insides. Alicia stepped forward, her lawyer's tone echoing through the restaurant. Mr. Russo, I suggest you keep your comments to yourself. My client has every legal right to be here, and any threats will be noted. But Russo only smirked, leaning back in his chair. Noted? Lady, people like me don't get noted. We get remembered. Naomi felt her fists clench again, but she forced herself to stay calm. She wouldn't let him win. Not here, not tonight. Instead, she turned back to the blonde woman. You still haven't told me your name. The woman's lips curled into a thin smile. Victoria Lane. Naomi filed the name away in her mind. She didn't recognize it, but she would. She'd run it through every FBI database until she knew exactly who Victoria Lane was and what string she had pulled. Victoria, Naomi said slowly, whatever game you're playing, ends tonight. Victoria tilted her head. You think you could just walk back in and take control because you once had your name on the papers? Things change. People change. Maybe you should learn to let go. Naomi's chest burned with anger, but Alicia put a firm hand on her arm. Naomi, not here. Naomi took a deep breath. She knew Alicia was right. The restaurant was crawling with eyes and ears. Every word she spoke could be twisted, used against her later. She had to play this smart. Still, she wasn't leaving empty-handed. She walked toward the kitchen doors. The guard moved to block her, but Alicia stepped in fast. If you lay a hand on my client, we'll file assault charges before the night is over. The guard hesitated, clearly unsure. Naomi pushed past and entered the kitchen. Her heart sank. Gone were the familiar pots, pans, and warm chatter of her staff. The kitchen buzzed with strangers, men and women she didn't know, moving like they owned the place. But it wasn't just that. On one of the side counters, half hidden behind trays of food, Naomi spotted boxes. Cardboard boxes with no restaurant logo, just plain brown, sealed tight. She moved toward them, but young cook stepped in front of her, blocking her view. You're not supposed to be back here. Naomi stared at him, her FBI instincts screaming. Those boxes weren't food supplies. Something else was being stored here. What's in those? She asked. The cook shifted nervously. Just ingredients. Naomi didn't buy for a second. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Listen carefully. I'm Naomi Carter. This is my restaurant, and I know when someone's lying to me. What's in those boxes? The cook swallowed hard, glancing toward the swinging doors where Victoria stood watching like a hawk. His voice dropped. I can't say. They'll kill me if I do. Naomi's blood ran cold. Kill. That word changed everything. Before she could press further, Victoria clapped her hands sharply. All right, that's enough sightseeing. Out of my kitchen. Her kitchen. The words made Naomi's stomach twist. But she didn't fight it, not yet. She let the cook slip away and followed Alicia back out to the main floor. Alicia leaned close, whispering, You see something? Naomi nodded slightly. Boxes. Something they don't want anyone looking at. Alicia's eyes hardened. Then we've got them. This isn't just a case of them pushing you out. It's bigger. Much bigger. Naomi turned her gaze back toward Russo and his men. They were laughing again, drinking, acting as though the restaurant was theirs. Victoria stood proudly near the bar, arms crossed like a queen in her stolen castle. Naomi didn't move. She didn't shout. She didn't storm out. She just stood there, letting the weight of the moment settle. Because now she knew the truth. This wasn't just about humiliation. It was about something criminal, something hidden, and she was going to uncover it, piece by piece, no matter how dangerous it got. And when the storm finally broke, they would regret ever thinking they could erase Naomi Carter. Naomi didn't sleep that night. After leaving Carter's table with her legal team, she sat in her apartment staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Every detail of the evening played over and over again. The smirk on Russo's face, Victoria's cold words, the cook's trembling voice whispering they'll kill me if I do. It was no longer about humiliation. Something criminal was happening inside her restaurant, and she couldn't ignore it. By morning, Alicia called. I've already filed an emergency injunction, Alicia said over the phone. It will force them to freeze operations until the ownership dispute is settled. Naomi paced her living room, phone pressed tight to her ear. Good. But Russo won't just sit back and let lawyers scare him. He's using my restaurant for something dirty. I saw those boxes. I know. Alicia said, her voice calm but firm. But don't do anything reckless. We'll dig, we'll find evidence, but you can't charge in guns blazing. Naomi sighed, staring out the window at the busy D.C. streets below. She wasn't just an owner, she was an FBI agent. And agents didn't wait around while criminals planted roots in plain sight. I hear you, Naomi said. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't sit still. By midday, she drove back to the bureau. The offices buzzed with activity, agents walking briskly through the halls. Naomi's partner, Special Agent Daniel Brooks, spotted her the moment she walked in. You look like hell, Brooks said, frowning. Rough night, Naomi muttered. He studied her face. This about Baltimore? Naomi shook her head. No, it's personal. She paused, then added, It's Carter's table. Brooks frowned deeper. Your restaurant? What about it? Naomi explained everything. Being kicked out Victoria Lane, Russo sitting inside like he owned the place, and the boxes hidden in the kitchen. Brooks listened carefully, his expression hardening. Russo, Brooks said when she finished. That guy's been slippery for years. We've tried tying him to Marino's operations, but he always ducks charges. If he's using your restaurant, Brooks let the thought hang in the air. Naomi leaned closer. Then we've got leverage. But I need proof. Real proof. Brooks hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's do this the right way. We'll surveil. We'll dig. But Naomi, don't let your anger cloud judgment. That's what Russo wants. Naomi gave a small, humorless smile. Don't worry. I know how to play it. That night, Naomi and Brooks parked across the street from Carter's table in an unmarked SUV. The city was alive. Horns honking, people laughing as they passed by, but Naomi's eyes were fixed only on the glow of her restaurant's windows. Through binoculars, she watched unfamiliar staff shuffle in and out. Boxes, similar to the ones she saw in the kitchen, were carried through the back entrance. They were too heavy to be simple food supplies. Brooks scribbled notes. They're moving product. No doubt about it. Naomi adjusted the binoculars, her pulse quickening. Then the question is, what kind? At around midnight, a black van pulled up. Two men stepped out, both wearing dark jackets. They knocked on the back door. Within seconds, someone let them in. Minutes later, they came out carrying lighter boxes, loading them carefully into the van. Brooks muttered under his breath. Classic drop-off. They're moving shipments out of here like clockwork. Naomi's stomach twisted. Out of my kitchen. Her anger nearly pushed her to storm across the street, badge raised, but she forced herself still. This wasn't just about pride. It was about building a case solid enough to bring Russo and Victoria down for good. They stayed parked until the van drove away, disappearing into the night. Naomi's fists clenched as the taillights faded. This isn't just theft, she said. They're running an operation through my restaurant. Drugs, maybe weapons. Whatever it is, it's big. And they think they can do it under my nose. Brooks exhaled slowly. Then we'll nail them. But we need more. Surveillance, wiretaps, financials. You know the drill. Naomi nodded. She knew the drill. But patience wasn't easy when the very place that carried her parents' photos on the walls was being dirted by criminals. The next day, Alicia met Naomi in her office. She looked tired but determined. The court date is set, Alicia said, sliding a folder across the desk. We'll argue for immediate reinstatement of your ownership. But Naomi, Russo has money and influence. He'll fight dirty. Naomi flipped through the folder, her mind split between legal battles and criminal evidence. Then we fight dirtier. Legally, cleanly, but harder than they expect. Alicia studied her. You're not just thinking about the restaurant anymore, are you? Naomi looked up, her eyes sharp. No, I'm thinking about taking Russo down. Completely. That evening, Naomi drove to Marcus's apartment, the head chef she hadn't seen in weeks. She knocked on his door until finally it cracked open. Marcus looked thinner, his eyes tired, his voice hushed. Naomi, he whispered, you shouldn't be here. Naomi stepped inside, closing the door behind her. What happened? Why did you leave? Marcus rubbed his face, glancing nervously at the window. I didn't leave. I was forced out. They came one night, Russo's men. Said if I didn't walk away, they'd hurt my family. Victoria took over the next morning. I didn't have a choice. Naomi's chest tightened. Marcus, what's in those boxes? Marcus swallowed hard. Guns. Smuggled in with food shipments. They used the kitchen as cover, then moved the weapons out at night. I didn't say a word because I didn't want to die. The room went quiet. Naomi's heart pounded. Guns. Smuggling. In a restaurant. Marcus grabbed her arms suddenly, his eyes wide with fear. Naomi, don't go after them. These people are dangerous. Russo, he doesn't forgive. If he knows you're digging, he'll come for you. Naomi looked him straight in the eye. Marcus, I don't scare easy. You know that. But I promise, I won't let them get away with this. Not in my place. Not in my city. Marcus shook his head slowly, but Naomi's resolve only grew stronger. When she left his apartment, the night air felt heavier than ever. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, 1,000 thoughts spinning. They weren't just humiliating her anymore. They were using her dream, her restaurant, as a hub for crime. And if Russo thought she would sit back and let that happen, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Naomi Carter was an FBI agent, and she was just getting started. The morning sun cut through Naomi's blinds, but she hadn't slept. She sat at her dining table, files spread everywhere, old deeds to the restaurant, contracts, business permits. Her laptop glowed with tabs open to financial records and court schedules. Coffee sat untouched beside her. Her phone buzzed. Brooks, we tailed that van from last night, he said without preamble. It ended up at a warehouse near the docks. Heavy security, no markings. Looks like Russo's running distribution out of there. Naomi sat up straighter. Then we've got them. That connects the restaurant to something bigger. Not enough, Brooks replied. We need surveillance inside. Otherwise, it's just another empty suspicion in court. Naomi pinched the bridge of her nose. He was right. Suspicion wasn't proof. Russo had probably covered his tracks 100 times before. But this time, Naomi wasn't going to let him walk away clean. Later that day, she met Alicia in her office downtown. Papers were stacked high on Alicia's desk, her paralegal typing furiously in the background. I spoke to the judge, Alicia said, sliding a document toward Naomi. The injunction hearing is in 3 days. Until then, Russo and Victoria technically still have control. But if we can prove criminal activity, we'll crush them in court. Naomi tapped the desk impatiently. We don't have 3 days. They're moving guns to my restaurant now. Every night, they're shipping more out. Alicia leaned forward. Naomi, I'm your lawyer. I'll fight for your business in the courtroom. But outside of it, you're the FBI. That's where you win. Naomi nodded slowly. Alicia was right. The fight had 2 fronts, legal and criminal, and she needed to win both. That evening, Naomi and Brooks sat in their SUV again, parked with a clear view of Carter's table's back entrance. The night air buzzed with city noise, sirens in the distance, footsteps echoing against brick walls, but Naomi's focus never wavered. At around 11 p.m., the same black van arrived. The process repeated. Boxes went in, lighter boxes came out. Brooks muttered, it's clean. Too clean. They've done this before. Naomi's jaw tightened. Then we make it dirty. She grabbed her jacket and stepped out of the SUV. Brooks cursed under his breath. Naomi, wait, but she was already moving. She stayed low, blending into the shadows as she circled behind the alley. Every step echoed in her chest like a drum. She wasn't here as the owner tonight. She was here as an agent. The back door cracked open. 2 men carried boxes out, their laughter careless. Naomi pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. As they set the boxes down to adjust their grip, she moved quickly. Freeze. FBI. Her voice was sharp, commanding. The men spun, eyes wide. For a second, time froze, the boxes between them, their hands empty. Then one of them bolted. Naomi lunged forward, tackling him hard to the ground. The second man dropped the box and ran. Brooks was already out of the SUV, chasing after him. Naomi pinned the man down, her knee pressing into his back. What's in the box? She demanded. The man grunted, trying to twist free. I don't know what you're talking about. Naomi yanked his arm tighter. Try again. His breath came ragged, his fear leaking through. I just move the stuff. That's it. I don't ask questions. Brooks returned moments later, panting. The other one got away. Naomi glared down at the man she had pinned. Then this one better start talking. But before she could press further, the back door swung open again. 2 more men appeared, and behind them, Victoria Lane. She looked calm, even amused. Well, Victoria said coolly. Agent Carter, I was wondering how long before you started playing cowboy. Naomi didn't move. This is my restaurant. You're moving guns through my kitchen. You think I'm going to sit back and let that happen? Victoria smirked. You're brave. But brave doesn't win. Control does. And right now, you don't have any. Her men stepped closer, hands near their jackets. Naomi's instinct screamed. Brooks whispered quickly, we need backup. Naomi kept her eyes locked on Victoria. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Then, without another word, she pulled her knee off the man on the ground, shoving him toward Victoria's men. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. Victoria's smirk widened, but Naomi saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Naomi had made her nervous, and that was something. Naomi and Brooks backed out of the alley, their retreat slow but steady. They climbed back into the SUV, both breathing heavily. Brooks slammed his hand against the steering wheel. Damn it, Naomi. That could have gone bad fast. Naomi's eyes stayed on the glowing windows of Carter's table. It already has, but now we know for sure. Guns. Smuggling. Victoria's in it up to her neck. Brooks shook his head. Then we bring the hammer down. But carefully. We'll need surveillance warrants, wiretaps, the whole 9 yards. Naomi finally leaned back in her seat, exhaustion pulling at her bones. But beneath the fatigue was fire. They think they've taken everything from me, she said quietly. But they don't know me. I don't break easy, and I don't walk away. Across the street, Carter's table glowed warm and golden, filled with strangers and criminals. Naomi's fists clenched. She wasn't just fighting for a restaurant anymore. She was fighting for her name, and she was ready to burn every inch of Russo's empire down to the ground to take it back. Naomi spent the next morning buried in files at the bureau. Every agent in the building seemed busy, but her focus never wavered from one name, Vincent Russo. His file stretched thick across her desk. Arrests, failed prosecutions, whispered connections to the Marino family. Every time law enforcement got close, witnesses went silent, judges hesitated, or evidence disappeared. But now Naomi had something Russo hadn't planned for, his operation running through a restaurant. Brooks walked into her office carrying 2 coffees. He set one down in front of her. You've been at it since dawn. You need fuel. Naomi barely looked up. I don't need fuel. I need a warrant. Brooks sat across from her, sipping his coffee. I spoke to the director this morning. They're not ready to move on Russo yet. Too risky, not enough solid proof. Naomi's hands curled into fists. Not enough proof? We watch guns being moved out of my restaurant. How is that not enough? Brooks leaned back, his tone calm but firm. Naomi, you know how this works. One shaky raid, one technicality, and Russo walks again. We can't just storm in. Naomi exhaled sharply, forcing herself to steady. He was right, even if it made her blood boil. Then we build the case, she said finally. Surveillance, financial trails, whatever it takes. We catch them red-handed. Brooks nodded. That's the plan. But Naomi, this isn't just business for you. It's personal. Don't let that cloud your judgment. She gave a humorless laugh. When Russo and Victoria took my restaurant, they made it personal. But I'm not going to lose control. I'm going to win. That night, Naomi and Brooks set up a hidden camera across from Carter's table. The tiny device blended into the shadows of a streetlight, angled perfectly at the back door. From their SUV, they watched the live feed on a small monitor. The pattern repeated, men hauling boxes in and out, the same black van returning, the same nervous movements. But tonight, something different happened. Around midnight, Russo himself stepped out of the back door. Naomi's breath caught. There he was, dressed in a sharp suit, cigarette glowing in the dark. He laughed with one of his men, motioning toward the van. Brooks muttered, that's the link we need. Russo on site, overseeing operations. Naomi's eyes stayed locked on the monitor. Save that footage. If nothing else, that proves he's tied to the shipments. They filmed for hours, documenting every movement, until exhaustion finally pulled them home. The next day, Naomi sat in court for the injunction hearing. The room buzzed with tension as lawyers shuffled papers, the judge stern behind a bench. Alicia sat beside Naomi, calm but fierce, ready to strike. Across the aisle sat Victoria Lane, smug as ever, with her own team of lawyers in dark suits. The judge adjusted his glasses. We are here to determine temporary control of Carter's table until ownership disputes are resolved. Ms. Carter, your counsel may begin. Alicia rose, her voice sharp. Your Honor, my client Naomi Carter is the rightful owner of Carter's table. She holds the deed, the licenses, the permits. The sudden takeover by Ms. Lane is unlawful and unsupported by any legal transfer. What's worse, Alicia paused, her eyes flicking toward Victoria, There is credible evidence the restaurant is being used for criminal activity under the current control. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Victoria's lips tightened. One of her lawyers stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. These are baseless accusations designed to smear my client's reputation. The judge raised a hand. Objection sustained. Unless hard evidence is presented, we will focus on ownership documents. Naomi clenched her jaw. She had the evidence, but it wasn't in the courtroom yet. The arguments dragged on for hours. Victoria's lawyers tried to paint Naomi as too distracted by her FBI work to manage a business. They waved around fabricated contracts, claiming Victoria had been brought on as a silent partner months ago. Naomi nearly exploded at the lies, but Alicia's calm hand on her arm kept her steady. When the session ended, the judge announced he would review the evidence and reconvene in a week. Temporary control would remain with Victoria until then. Naomi stormed out of the courtroom, fury burning in her chest. Alicia followed. Naomi, Alicia said firmly, don't let this break you. We're going to hit them harder. But we need that criminal evidence to crush her completely. Naomi turned sharply. Then we go all in? No more watching from the sidelines. We dig deeper. We infiltrate if we have to. I'm done waiting. That night, Naomi and Brooks drove back to the restaurant. The SUV was silent, tension thick in the air. Finally, Brooks spoke. What's the plan? Naomi checked the gun holstered at her side. We're going inside. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You're talking about a break-in. I'm talking about gathering evidence. Naomi shot back. If we sit around waiting for paperwork, Russo will clear out those boxes and we'll have nothing. Brooks sighed but didn't argue. He knew she was right. They parked 2 blocks away, slipping through alleys until they reached the back of Carter's table. The door was locked tight, but Naomi knew the building better than anyone. She guided Brooks to a side entrance she had used years ago when the place was still under construction. The lock was cheap, recently changed, but she made quick work of it with a small tool from her pocket. The door creaked open, and they stepped inside. The kitchen was dark, the hum of refrigerators filling the silence. Naomi's heart raced as she moved toward the counter where she had seen the boxes days earlier. They were still there. She tore one open with her knife. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, were rifles. Sleek, polished, deadly. Brooks exhaled sharply. Jesus, that's enough to bury Russo for good. Naomi's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and snapped photos. This is it. This is the proof we need. But just as she slid the phone back into her pocket, a sharp click echoed through the room. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Naomi froze. Slowly, she turned. Victoria Lane stood in the doorway, a pistol aimed steady at Naomi's chest. Well, Victoria said, her voice cold and steady. Looks like the owner finally came home. Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears as she stared at the black barrel of Victoria's pistol. The dim kitchen lights reflected off the metal, making it look even deadlier. For the first time since this nightmare started, Naomi realized how quickly everything could end. Step away from the box, Victoria ordered, her fingers steady on the trigger. Slowly, Naomi raised her hands, palms open, showing she had nothing in them. Brooks did the same, his eyes fixed on Victoria. He was ready to react, but Naomi knew one wrong move could turn the night into tragedy. Victoria smirked, her eyes narrowing. You really thought you could sneak back into your own restaurant and play detective? You don't belong here anymore, Naomi. This place is mine now. Naomi's voice came out firm, but calm. You're not a restaurant owner, Victoria. You're a front for criminals. You think you've won, but you're leaving a trail you won't be able to cover. Victoria's smile faltered for just a second before she pressed the gun forward. Spare me the speech, Agent Carter. You think that badge makes you untouchable? In this town, Russo's word means more than any law. Brooks shifted his stance slightly, enough for Naomi to notice, but not enough to draw Victoria's eye. He was preparing to move if she gave him the chance. Russo doesn't care about you. Naomi pressed, keeping her voice sharp. You're just convenient. When things get bad, he'll throw you to the wolves to save himself. Is it the life you want? Victoria's jaw tightened. For a brief second, doubt flickered across her face, but then the kitchen door swung open. 2 of Russo's men stormed in, both armed, both ready. One of them barked. Boss said we got trouble. What's... He froze when he saw Naomi and Brooks standing there. Victoria didn't take her eyes off Naomi. Tie them up. The men moved quickly. Naomi and Brooks were disarmed, their hands bound with zip ties behind their backs. They were shoved into chairs near the counter. Victoria leaned in close to Naomi, her voice low and venomous. You want proof? Well, here it is. But it'll be the last thing you ever see. The men laughed, but Naomi stayed calm. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to let it show. She studied the room, every corner, every detail. If she was going to get out of this, she needed a plan. Brooks caught her eye. His expression said what words couldn't. Stay sharp. Wait for the opening. Victoria paced slowly in front of them. You know, Naomi, I used to admire you. A black woman running a successful restaurant in this city? It was inspiring, but you didn't appreciate it. You didn't understand what you had. Russo gave me the chance to take it, and I did. Naomi's lip curled. You didn't take it. You stole it. And you're too blind to see you're just being used. Victoria's face darkened, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She answered quickly, turning her back slightly. Naomi listened hard. Yes, she's here, Victoria said into the phone. Both of them. What do you want me to do? A pause. Then Victoria's shoulders stiffened. Understood. She hung up and turned back to Naomi, her smile returning. Russo wants to see you himself. The men yanked Naomi and Brooks to their feet, forcing them toward the back door. The cold night air hit Naomi's face as they were shoved into the back of the black van she had been watching for days. The ride was rough and silent, the only sound the low rumble of the engine and the occasional muttered order from the men. Naomi's mind raced. Every turn, every stoplight, they were leaving the downtown area, heading into the industrial district. Finally, the van screeched to a halt in front of a warehouse. The doors were thrown open, and Naomi and Brooks were dragged inside. The warehouse was vast, dimly lit, filled with crates stacked high against the walls. The smell of oil and gunpowder hung heavy in the air. At the center of the room, sitting at a metal table, was Vincent Russo. He looked exactly like his file photo, slick-back gray hair, expensive suit, a gold watch flashing under the lights. But in person, his presence was heavier, colder. His eyes locked on Naomi as she was shoved forward. Well, Russo said, his voice smooth and dripping with arrogance. The famous Agent Carter. You've been making quite a mess for me. Naomi straightened her back despite the zip ties cutting into her wrists. You're sloppy, Russo. Running guns out of a restaurant? You've gotten careless. Russo chuckled, shaking his head. Careless? No. Bold. The police don't touch me, the courts don't touch me, and now you, an FBI agent, are standing here in my warehouse, tied up like every other fool who's crossed me. Brooks stepped forward despite being restrained. You've made a mistake bringing us here. You think no one knows where we are? You're wrong. Russo's smile widened. No, I'm not. You've been careful, but not careful enough. Your little surveillance? Gone. Your evidence? Already being moved. By the time anyone comes looking, you'll be nothing but a rumor. Naomi's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice even. You can try to erase the evidence, but you can't erase me. Someone will come. And when they do, everything you built will fall apart. Russo leaned forward, his tone sharp. That's where you're wrong. Tonight, Agent Carter, your story ends. He motioned to his men. They dragged Naomi and Brooks toward the far end of the warehouse, where an open pit of scrap metal waited. The message was clear. No one would ever find them again. Naomi's mind raced. The pit was close, the men distracted. She felt the zip ties straining against her wrist as she twisted, harder and harder, ignoring the pain. Then she heard it, a faint snap. One of her hands was free. She kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. Her eyes met Brooks. He gave the slightest nod, understanding. As the men shoved them closer to the pit, Naomi acted. She swung her free hand hard, grabbing one guard's gun before he even realized what was happening. The warehouse erupted in shouts as Brooks lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the second guard. A shot rang out. The bullet slammed into a crate, splintering wood. Naomi ducked low, the pistol now in her hand, aimed steady. Russo rose from his chair, fury flashing in his eyes. Kill them, he roared. The warehouse exploded into chaos. The warehouse erupted like a storm. Shouts echoed against the steel walls. Gunfire cracked through the air, and crates shattered as bullets tore into them. Naomi dropped low behind a stack of barrels, clutching the pistol she had ripped from the guard. Her heart hammered, but her aim stayed steady. Brooks wrestled with one of Russo's men, grunting as they slammed into the concrete floor. The man threw wild punches, but Brooks absorbed them, countering with sharp elbows until the guard dropped. Brooks yanked the man's weapon and rolled behind cover beside Naomi. We don't have much time, Brooks muttered, loading a round into the pistol. More are coming. Naomi peeked around the barrels. Russo hadn't run. He stood near the table, barking orders, confident as ever. He trusted his men to finish the job. Cut them off at the side doors. Russo yelled, pointing to his crew. Don't let them out alive. Naomi's eyes darted across the warehouse. The exit was far, blocked by men with rifles. She and Brooks were pinned down. If they didn't move soon, they'd be trapped. A bullet smacked the barrel above Naomi's head, showering her with rust and dust. She ducked back. We need a distraction, she hissed. Brooks scanned the area. His eyes landed on a forklift parked near a pile of crates stacked high with metal canisters. He smirked. That'll do. Covering his head with his arm, Brooks bolted from behind the barrels, sprinting toward the forklift. Gunfire followed him instantly, sparks flying off the concrete floor at his heels. Naomi rose just enough to fire back, her shots forcing the men to duck. Brooks jumped into the forklift, twisting the keys still in the ignition. The engine roared to life. He yanked the controls, sending the heavy machine jerking forward. The front prongs slammed into the stacked crates, sending the canisters crashing to the ground in a deafening clatter. The The noise was enough. The guards turned their attention to the chaos, giving Naomi her chance. She darted out, firing at their legs, dropping one man with a scream. Brooks swung the forklift hard, using the massive machine as a moving shield. "Go," he shouted. Naomi sprinted for the nearest stairwell that led up to the catwalk above. From there, she'd have a better angle to cover Brooks. She bounded up 2 steps at a time, boots thudding on the metal grates. On the catwalk, she crouched low, sighting down at the guards below. Her shots were sharp, controlled, one to the shoulder, another to the leg. Men dropped their weapons and scrambled for cover. Russo's voice cut through the chaos, angrier now. "Stop them, damn it. Don't let them leave this building." Naomi's eyes locked on him. Calm in the middle of the storm, he lit a cigar, as if this was just another business deal. His arrogance made her grip the gun tighter. "Naomi," Brooks shouted. She looked down, just in time to see a guard sneaking behind the forklift with a knife. Without hesitation, Naomi fired. The man collapsed before he could strike. Brooks gave her a quick nod of thanks before steering the forklift toward the warehouse doors. The heavy machine rammed into the doors, but they didn't budge. They were reinforced steel. Brooks cursed under his breath. "We're not getting out this way." Naomi scanned the catwalk, spotting a row of skylights overhead. "The roof," she yelled. Brooks looked up and grinned. "You first." Naomi dashed across the catwalk, climbing a ladder bolted to the wall. The rungs rattled under her grip, but she didn't slow. She slammed the butt of her pistol into the skylight, shattering the glass. Cold night air rushed in as shards rained down. "Up here," she shouted. Brooks scrambled after her, but before he could climb, Russo finally stood from his chair. He waved his men back, his voice calm again. "Enough wasting bullets. Bring them to me alive." The order shifted the energy instantly. The guards didn't fire. They advanced, slowly, confidently, surrounding Brooks at the base of the ladder. Naomi's chest tightened. "Brooks, move!" Brooks swung his pistol, firing at the closest men, but they closed in fast. One struck his arm, knocking the gun loose. Another slammed him against the ladder, forcing him to the ground. "Naomi, go!" Brooks shouted, his voice raw. She aimed down, ready to fire into the crowd, but Russo stepped forward, his smug smile lit by the glow of his cigar. He pointed at her. "You shoot, Agent Carter, and your partner dies right here. Drop it." Her finger hovered on the trigger. Every muscle screamed to her to pull it, but Brooks' eyes met hers. He shook his head, blood running down his temple. "Don't," he whispered. Naomi froze, torn in two. The men wrenched Brooks' arms behind his back, dragging him forward to Russo. Russo exhaled a puff of smoke and smiled up at Naomi. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Carter. But now I have leverage. Come down, or I put a bullet in your partner's head." The warehouse fell silent, every eye on Naomi. Her chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. She could run now, disappear into the night through the roof. But leaving Brooks' men handing Russo a victory, she couldn't stomach. Her knuckles whitened around the pistol. She thought of her restaurant, her name being dragged through the dirt, her dream being stolen. Now Brooks' life hung in the balance. She slowly lowered the gun, her voice steady despite the fear twisting her gut. "Fine, I'm coming down." Russo's grin widened as his men relaxed. Smart choice. Naomi climbed back down the ladder, her boots hitting the concrete floor. She placed the pistol on the ground and raised her hands. Immediately, 2 men grabbed her, yanking her arms behind her back, the zip ties cutting into her skin again. Russo stepped closer, studying her like she was a prize he had finally won. "See, Agent Carter, in my world, everyone breaks. And tonight you broke too." Naomi met his gaze, her eyes burning with quiet fury. "You think this is over? It's not." Russo smirked, leaning close enough for her to smell the cigar smoke on his breath. "By the time your legal team even hears about this, you'll be gone. Forgotten. And so will your partner." Naomi's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The guards shoved Naomi and Brooks into the center of the warehouse, binding them tighter this time, chains instead of zip ties. The cold metal bit into Naomi's wrists, but she forced herself to stay calm. As Russo turned and walked back to his table, Brooks whispered through clenched teeth, "You should have left. Now we're both screwed." Naomi shook her head. "No, we're going to survive this. And when we do, Russo will regret ever laying hands on us." Brooks managed a faint smirk despite the blood on his lip. "I hope you've got a plan, because right now, all I see is a room full of guns and 2 dead agents." Naomi's eyes narrowed as she scanned the warehouse. Every crate, every shadow, every guard's position. A plan was forming, piece by piece. And when it came together, it would shake Russo's empire to its core. The chains cut into Naomi's wrists as she shifted uncomfortably on the cold floor. Around her, Russo's men kept their guns ready, waiting for orders. The warehouse had gone quieter now, the chaos replaced with a chilling calm. Russo sat at his table again, sipping whiskey, his cigar glowing faintly. He looked like a man who had already won. But Naomi's mind never stopped working. She studied the guards, their spacing, their weapons, their blind spots. She had been trained for situations like this, moments where fear tried to crush you. She breathed slowly, forcing her heartbeat to steady. Beside her, Brooks groaned. His shirt was torn, blood staining the fabric near his ribs. He leaned against a crate, his face pale, but his eyes still sharp. "You got that plan yet?" he muttered. Naomi glanced at him. "Working on it." Russo set his glass down and stood. His polished shoes clicked across the concrete as he approached. "You know, Agent Carter, you could have had a quiet life. Kept your restaurant. Lived your little dream. But no, you had to keep poking where you didn't belong." Naomi met his eyes without flinching. "It's not your city, Russo. You can't buy it, no matter how much blood you spill." Russo chuckled darkly. "And yet here you are, chained, helpless. Tell me, what's the FBI going to do without its star agent?" Naomi didn't answer. She let him believe he had broken her because she needed him distracted. Every second he gloated was another second closer to her opening. A commotion at the far end of the warehouse drew her attention. One of Russo's men hurried in, whispering something in his ear. Russo's eyes narrowed. The street's crawling with cops. "How?" Naomi's lips curled into the faintest smile. "You think I came here without backup?" Russo's face darkened. "Lies. We cut your comms. No one followed you." But Naomi wasn't bluffing. Hours earlier, before she left the safe house, she had dropped a simple location ping to her legal team. If she didn't check in, they knew what it meant. And her legal team wasn't just lawyers. They had connections everywhere. Outside, sirens wailed. The sound grew louder. The guards inside shifted nervously, glancing at each other. For the first time, cracks showed in Russo's comm mask. "Hold your ground," he barked. "Nobody moves until I say so." Naomi leaned toward Brooks and whispered, "When it breaks, we move. Stay low." Brooks gave the faintest nod, wincing from the pain in his side. The warehouse doors rattled as someone pounded on them from outside. A booming voice followed. "Federal agents. Drop your weapons and step out with your hands where we can see them." Panic spread among Russo's men. Some aimed at the doors. Others muttered curses under their breath. Russo snapped, "Don't shoot unless I order it." His cigar shook slightly in his fingers. In that moment of distraction, Naomi acted. She shifted her hands, twisting hard against the chain. The sharp edge of a broken crate plank scraped against the metal. Her wrists burned as the chain began to weaken. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain. Brooks noticed. "Almost there," he whispered. "Almost." The pounding on the doors grew louder, then bang! A flash grenade burst through a side window. The blinding light and deafening crack threw the room into chaos. Guards shouted, some firing wildly, others covering their faces. The chain snapped. Naomi ripped free and lunged forward, grabbing the pistol from the nearest stun guard. She fired before he could react, dropping him instantly. "Brooks, move!" she shouted. Brooks kicked his legs out, tripping another guard as Naomi fired at a third. She slid across the floor, grabbing a knife from the down man's belt, and cut Brooks' chains loose. Gunfire erupted everywhere now. The warehouse filled with smoke and confusion as the FBI tactical team stormed in, shouting commands. Russo's men tried to fight back, but they were outmatched and outnumbered. Russo, however, wasn't done. He drew a pistol from his jacket and grabbed Naomi by the arm, yanking her close. The barrel pressed cold against her temple. "Tell them to stop, or you die," he hissed. Naomi froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. Agents shouted from across the warehouse, guns trained on Russo. Brooks raised his hands, his face twisted with anger. Russo dragged her backward toward a side exit, his grip iron-strong. "Drop your weapons," he yelled at the agents, "or I blow her brains out right here." Naomi's mind raced. One wrong move, and it was over. But she noticed something. Russo's hand was slick with sweat, his grip trembling just enough. He was losing control. She steadied her breathing. "You think this ends with me, Russo? You'll never walk out of here alive." "Shut up," he snarled, pressing the gun harder against her head. Her eyes darted to Brooks. For a split second, their gaze locked. It was all the signal he needed. Naomi stomped down hard on Russo's foot, twisting her body with all her strength. At the same moment, Brooks launched himself forward, slamming into Russo's side. The gun fired bang, but the bullet missed, sparking against the concrete wall. Naomi wrenched free, spinning and driving her elbow into Russo's jaw. The impact knocked the cigar from his mouth. She ripped the pistol from his hand and shoved him to the ground. Agents swarmed in instantly, tackling Russo and forcing his arms behind his back. His face smashed against the floor as cuffs clicked around his wrists. "It's over, Russo," Naomi said, standing over him, her chest heaving. He spat blood onto the floor and glared up at her. "You'll regret this. You hear me? You'll regret it." Naomi stared back, her voice low and steady. "No, I'm done regretting. Now it's your turn." The agents dragged Russo away as the last of his men were cuffed and disarmed. The warehouse buzzed with shouts, radios crackling, the smell of gunpowder still heavy in the air. Naomi dropped to one knee beside Brooks. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale. She pressed her hand against his wound. Stay with me. Ambulance is on the way. He forced a weak smile. Knew you had a plan. Naomi managed a small smile back, though her eyes stung. Always. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, loading Brooks onto a stretcher. Naomi stood aside, her clothes torn, her wrists bruised, but her spirit unbroken. She watched as the FBI agents loaded Russo into a black SUV, his empire crumbling around him. Outside, the night air hit her face, cool and sharp. Blue and red lights flashed across the street, sirens echoing in the distance. Her legal team stood by, their expressions a mix of relief and awe. One of them, a tall woman in a navy suit, approached. You okay, Naomi? Naomi took a long breath, glancing back at the warehouse. I will be, but this isn't just about me. They try to take everything I built. Now I'm taking it back. The lawyer nodded firmly. Then let's get to work. Naomi looked toward the city skyline, her jaw set with determination. She wasn't just an FBI agent anymore, or a woman fighting for a restaurant. She was a survivor who had faced down corruption and refused to break. And this time, she wasn't alone. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, in other to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.